Holy crap. We're back. It's been way too long. It's been maybe what, 4, 5 months since we did a last episode, but welcome back to the greatest football show that you're probably never gonna watch. I'm obviously kidding, of course. It is OC and TJ, also known as the Collin show when it's only one person. Welcome back to another fun season of football. There's been a lot of chaos, a lot of turmoil, a lot of drama, but preseason is back. We're entering the second week, and that means division previews are just about to start up again. So I'm doing things a little bit differently. Normally, what I would do is that I would do a division preview every single week, but obviously, a lot of crap has happened in my life. A lot of big life-changing events that kept me from doing as many shows as I want, whether it's work or going back to school, things of that nature. So we're going to do things a little bit differently and spice it up a little bit. 8 division previews in 8 days. Can I pull it off? Who knows? It's me. Well, you can never really get a full assessment, but we're going to do our damn best. So without further ado, I think we should start with the NFC West. So let me pull up their depth chart, actually, because I actually think, we should really keep everything in perspective when it comes to these things. And by the way, before I, get into this, for whatever reason, when I start sharing the screen, it's going to pop into this random window. So when I do go onto their depth chart, I hope to God this works. All right, let's see what we can do here, all right? Okay, so the Los Angeles Rams coming off their first division title since 2018, if I'm not mistaken, when they got to the Super Bowl against, the New England Patriots, and they ended up losing 13-3 with Jared Goff at quarterback. Okay, it works. Perfect. Entering this season, they're coming off a heartbreaking loss in the divisional round to the Philadelphia Eagles just 1 week after absolutely demolishing the 14-win Minnesota Vikings, in which they sacked Sam Darnold 9 times and won that game 27-9. And they're trying to prove that last year was not a fluke, that they are capable of going on an even deeper playoff run. And guys like Dan Orlovsky are buying into the hype, mainly because Matthew Stafford was his former teammate, and he'll do anything he can to support the guy that pretty much put the Lions franchise back on the map. But speaking of Matthew Stafford, he is definitely having a trivial offseason as we speak. They did bring him back on a readjusted contract. It started with that. They brought him back on a 2-year, $80 million pay raise with $40 million guaranteed. So all those reports about him meeting up with Tom Brady and getting recruited to join the Las Vegas Raiders, that obviously got thrown out the window. But that's not the biggest thing that has, been surrounding Matthew Stafford this offseason. There's been a lingering back injury that has persisted throughout all of training camp. He was supposed to practice on Monday, yet he experienced a little bit of a setback, and he was obviously in street clothes the next day. So that is a huge sign of concern. And if you look at their quarterback depth chart, the next 3 guys are Jimmy Garoppolo, Stetson Bennett, who didn't do too bad last week against the Cowboys, and Dresser Wynn. Yeah, that does not really inspire confidence, if you ask me. I actually thought about this, but I didn't really know if, the Rams are going to be willing to do this just because of the cap situation. But if I'm Les Snead and if I'm Sean McVay, I'm calling the Atlanta Falcons and I'm asking, what the price is for Kirk Cousins. Obviously, I don't know if they're going to be able to pull it off because, Kirk Cousins has an albatross of a contract. And if we go to their contract situation, the Los Angeles Rams, they only got $19 million in cap. So my guess is they're probably going to have to let go of a couple pieces. And this is honestly the roster, that the Rams are counting on to make sure that they, get past the second round and at least show that, they are a team to be feared and they're a team to be respected. And if you look at Matthew Stafford's cap hit, that's the biggest reason why you can't do it because, 47.4, close to $48 million that you're owed for next season or for this season, I should say. Yeah, that there's a big reason why, the only way that, the Rams could even do it is if the Falcons take on that contract. And, those negotiations, they can take a little bit of they can take a while. So we'll see what happens there. I'm just hoping Matthew Stafford doesn't walk into what the season that he had in 2022, the year after they won the Super Bowl. If you remember, he had the shoulder injury, and that had been, ailing him. And it was a big reason why the Rams had the disastrous season that they did, the 5-12 season that they did. But if you look at the roster that they have, I don't know how they could be as bad as they were in 2022. I expect them to have just as much success as they did last year and even a couple years ago. And one big reason why is because of their focal running back, Kyren Williams. You might think, oh, well, what the heck does Kyren Williams matter? He's not that big of a name. Well, how does 1 yard short of 1,300 rushing yards and 14 touchdowns sound? Pretty good, right? 7th in the league in total rushing yards and one of the league leaders in touchdowns. I think he was in the top 5 if I'm not mistaken. With Jahmyr Gibbs and Jacobs and Jonathan Taylor. Yeah, and Derrick Henry. Just a thought. And then the wide receiver room obviously looks different. No Cooper Kupp. They released him. Over the last couple of years, really the last few years, he hasn't been healthy and he hasn't been able to put up the type of production that he did, in the first few seasons of his career. Certainly not the year where he, won the Triple Crown, leading the league in catches, yards, and touchdowns in the year that he won the Super Bowl MVP. But, now he's on the Seattle Seahawks, so he'll definitely have something to say in 2 matchups this year. But if you ask me, Nakua has certainly emerged as the focal point of that passing offense. Last year, 79 catches, 990 yards, 3 touchdowns. And by the way, he actually missed a few games. So the fact that he was able to fall 10 yards short of 1,000, with the time that he missed is honestly really impressive if you ask me. And more importantly, you have a very successful compliment and a pretty great consolation prize, if you ask me, in Davante Adams. Started with the Las Vegas Raiders, then asked for the trade, got to join Aaron Rodgers again with the New York Jets. Didn't get the wins that he wanted, but he still put up outstanding numbers. 1,063 yards, 8 touchdowns, still showed that he could play at a supremely high level, and more importantly, proved that he is still a top 10 receiver in this league. I know that, guys like Puka and Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, they've really emerged onto the scene. But Davante Adams is like, yeah, don't forget about me because I still got it. And now I'm on a team that is not only positioned to win, but I know that, they can put me in they can give me the opportunities to succeed and thrive. One underrated piece that, the Rams lost this offseason that I think will definitely be a little bit of a bigger loss than expected is Demarcus Robinson. He joined the San Francisco 49ers, another division rival. But if you ask me, when you're in an offense that's run by Sean McVay, you know that there's going to be at least 2 people that are going to emerge onto the scene. My guess it's probably going to be Jordan Whittington and Tutu Atwell, but who knows? There might be one guy on this list that, we might not expect. Brendan Covey, he was, a good returner for the Eagles, but never really showed that, he could be a good role player, as a receiver. Xavier Smith, maybe. And, you got to figure out who the third option is going to be because the tight end room does not really inspire confidence. I mean, Tyler Higbee really struggled to bounce back from the torn ACL. There's a reason why they drafted Terrence Ferguson in the 2nd round. So, we'll see how we'll be able to, climb up the depth chart. And then Colby Parkinson and Davis Allen, they're decent depth options. I think, when they're on the field, they can at least make a few big plays per game. But at the same time, there's a reason why they're 3rd and 4th, at least on this list. So if you can't establish who the third option is on this team, then the Rams offense, they might have a few games where they're one-dimensional. Obviously, Kyren Williams is just as much of a receiving threat, but, he's also a guy that can only do so much. You can only hope that one of these 2 can really establish their roles as decent complementary backs. They drafted Jarquez Hunter, who I liked coming out of Auburn. Blake Corum didn't really get a lot of opportunities. Obviously was a big impact in Jim Harbaugh's offense in Michigan. So this is an offense that definitely has a lot to prove, especially on the offensive line. They just extended Alaric Jackson. to a 3-year deal worth $56 million, $35 million guaranteed. But they also traded Jonah Jackson to Chicago. And, you know, it thrust Steve Avila into the starting job at left guard. Kevin Dotson really has developed into a blue chip right guard, since getting traded from Pittsburgh. Obviously, when you're in an offense with Sean McVay, like I said, you're going to have an opportunity to grow and develop and, regain confidence. So kudos to him there. Rob Havenstein still at right tackle. The center is what I'm really concerned about. Coleman Shelton and Bo Limmer. They allowed the 6th fewest sacks in the league. They were 13th in pressure percentage, this offensive line in general. So I'm not going to be too worried. But, this is definitely an interior that has a lot to prove. And if Matthew Stafford is not going to be healthy by week 1, then that's going to be a problem because Jimmy Garoppolo, he has a tendency to hold on to the ball too long. And he's going to make at least 1 or 2 mistakes that will swing the momentum the other way. Now let's get on to the defensive side of the ball because this was a defense that, honestly, I didn't see too much improvement from the year before. I thought it was just the same, going to give up a lot of points, going to give up a lot of yards, but they're opportunistic in takeaways and somewhat in sack production. If I can pull up the numbers here, they were 17th in points, 26th in total yards, 20th on third down, 23rd in passer rating, 25th in passing yards per attempt, 26th in yards per catch and passing touchdowns, 23rd in rush yards per carry, and 22nd in rush yards per game. And the biggest stat that I honestly thought was really surprising was that they only had 38 sacks. It was tied for 21st in the league, but they were also 10th in pressure percentage. If you look at the guys on that defensive line, you have to think to yourself, how in God's name did they only have 38 sacks? Because Braden Fisk had an outstanding rookie season, 8.5 sacks. Kobe Turner coming on as a true defensive end with 8 sacks of his own, along with 62 tackles. Byron Young, he's really developed into a quality edge rusher, 7.5 sacks with 13 quarterback hits. But you need better production for Jared Verse because he was one of their top draft picks last year, only had 4.5 sacks, 18 quarterback hits, 2 forced fumbles, and 2 fumble recoveries. They let Bobby Brown go, who was definitely a big run stuffer, but, there's a reason why, they still have Poona Ford. So it's going to be really interesting just to see, if this D-line is going to take that big leap because, they lost Michael Hoyt, they lost Christian Roseboom. Your run defense, wasn't so great. It was below average. Omar Spates, he's definitely going to fill that role into the, he's going to get that green dot on the back of his helmet, it looks like. And, you got 2 decent, veteran linebackers, Nate Landman and Troy Reader. They're not great, but, they're good rotational backs that, can be, that can be reliable when called upon. But to be quite honest, I don't really know if they're going to be that much better than they were last year. I really hope the sack number improves, but when it comes to their rush defense, you're probably going to be in for another below average season, especially in the conference that you're in when you got to go up against James Conner and Christian McCaffrey. And even the Seahawks have a decent running back tandem, even though they weren't great, but we'll get into that in just a second. The passing defense, again, not great, but opportunistic. They brought back Darius Williams. He's most likely going to be their quarterback 1. Akeller Witherspoon, he's going to be their second option. They brought him back on an extension. But the thing was, they gave up rates over 105. So they're coming off pretty down seasons. Kobe Durant, on the other hand, I really like him a lot. I think you put him in the slot, he can absolutely make some magic happen. He gave up a 74.1 rate, which is really good. 8 passes defended and an interception. You put him in the nickel, and, Darion Kendrick coming back from injury, missed all of last season with a torn ACL. They actually cut him, but they ended up bringing him back. So who knows what's going to happen in that regard. But I would say that, it's, like I said, it's probably going to be the same as it was last year or 2 years ago, just because you didn't really make too many notable changes. But you look at their safety room, I could actually, I could see it work because Cam Curl and Cameron Kinchens, they really stepped into their roles last year. And one underrated gem that I think is really going to turn the corner, Jalen McCullough. He's a ball player. He's a ball hawk. He's a beast. He can help out on the run. And I just think, if you're Chris Lake, the defensive coordinator, this is someone that, you really need to, give more reps towards. I think Chris Lake's still the defensive coordinator, but you get my point. As for how I think they're going to do this season overall, I think they could truly make a deep playoff run. I mean, if Matthew Stafford, is good to go week 1, then I think, the Rams will be in a good position to succeed. It's going to be tough winning the division again, just because the 49ers are trying to prove that last year was just an accident, and the Cardinals are, coming off an improved season, went 4 wins in 2023, 8 wins this year or last year. Now they're really trying to prove that they can get back into the wild card picture as well. And the Seahawks, if Sam Darnold can replicate, what he did last year, or at least put up quality numbers, then the Seahawks are going to be a team to be reckoned with, because their defense has improved and their offense is also trying to get off to a fresh start as well. But if you ask me, there are only 2 teams that are in the Rams' way this year: the Philadelphia Eagles and the Detroit Lions. They've proven that they could beat the 49ers. They did that twice last year. They've won 3 straight matchups, actually. But, I honestly just – their ceiling is the conference championship, in my opinion. But if you ask me, if they run into a giant in the first round, then that's probably where their road is going to end. But I'm going to say that they're going to go as far as the second round. And let me go into the next team division, or the next team that we're going to preview in this division. Let me pull it up right here. The Seattle Seahawks, coming off a 10-win season with Mike Macdonald in his first year as the head coach. Obviously, the biggest move that they made this offseason was trading Geno Smith away to Las Vegas Raiders, reuniting him with Pete Carroll. And I was like, okay, that's fine. He was going to ask for a bigger contract. He's getting up there in terms of age. I don't really think a new contract was the best decision, especially since, his time in Seattle has been above average at best and, mediocre at its worst. Got them to the playoffs his first year, but barely missed it the next 2. I'm sure that the Seattle Seahawks, didn't want to go down that road again. But here's the issue. Why in God's name did you give over $100 million to Sam Darnold? They're the same tier of quarterback. Guys that can win you games and, help you, get that 9-10 win mark, but not going to get you to where you need to go. And with Sam Darnold's case, he's coming off the best season of his career: 35 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 14 wins with the Minnesota Vikings. But, people are wondering, okay, he had a great supporting cast around him. He's got a hell of a head coach. The defense made tremendous strides. Might as well just be a one-year wonder. And in the Seattle Seahawks, he might get exposed again. And for good reason, because if you saw the last 2 games of the season last year against the Lions and against the Rams, he took a lot of sacks. He got absolutely exposed. He got punked. And when you hold on to the ball too long and you take unnecessary sacks and you make way too many negative plays, then all that does is just put your team in harm's way. So I'm personally hoping that Sam Darnold doesn't, revert back to what he was with the Jets and the Panthers when he couldn't stop seeing ghosts for who knows how long. And if I look at the supporting cast around him, I'm not sure. I'm going to get a lot of mixed results here. I like their running back tandem of Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, but here's the problem. They each totaled under 600 yards, and they totaled the 5th fewest rush yards in the league. Obviously, Kenneth Walker missed a lot of time due to injury, but still, under 600 yards, 5th fewest rush yards in the league. You need that number to improve dramatically. And with Clint Kubiak as the new offensive coordinator, that's going to be an area that you're going to, want to improve upon, because that has been, that has been, the Shanahan tree. Clint Kubiak, his father's Gary Kubiak. He was the offensive coordinator for Mike Shanahan in Denver. His son, Kyle Shanahan, obviously revolutionized that offense, helped out guys with the likes of, Matt LaFleur and Mike McDaniel and Sean McVay. And running the ball is a key pillar that you need to establish in order to open everything else up. Wide receiver corps, that definitely looks tremendously different. They cut Tyler Lockett, they released him, and they also traded DK Metcalf to the Pittsburgh Steelers. But if you ask me, Jackson Smith-Njigba did more than his part to establish himself as the focal point of the offense and to become the number 1 option on this football team. Ohio State is wide receiver university for a reason, and JSN is just the latest example. 100 catches, over 1,100 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns. They replaced Tyler Lockett with Cooper Kupp, coming off 710 yards, 67 catches, 6 touchdowns in 12 games. You just need to hope that he could stay healthy and stay on the field, because when he is still one of the best receivers in the league. The problem is he's not always available. And the biggest question mark that I have is who's going to be the third option, a little similar to the Los Angeles Rams. It's most likely going to be Marquez Valdes-Scantling, coming off 411 yards, with Buffalo and New Orleans. I thought it could be Jake Bobo, but his season last year was really underwhelming. And as for the tight end position, oh boy, it doesn't look too good. I mean, they drafted Elijah Arroyo, who had a pretty decent career in Miami. They drafted him in the second round for a reason, but durability has always been a huge issue for him. And A.J. Barner, I mean, maybe he could have a surprising breakout season, but you really just need to hope that everything goes right with that offense, especially on that offensive line. Because with Sam Darnold holding onto the ball too long, combined with an O-line that has been outright putrid over the last decade plus, possibly longer, it's just a recipe for disaster. I mean, they drafted Gray Zabel in the first round, which I honestly thought was a very underrated pick, in my opinion. So I thought it was a great decision there by John Schneider. But this is also an O-line that gave up the third most sacks and was ranked 26th in pressure percentage. You have Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas as your tackles. Good, not great. And these two positions right here, I honestly don't even know what to expect. So that's probably the one thing that I think is going to hold the Seahawks back from making the playoffs or possibly winning 9 to 10 games this year. Unless the defense completely revitalizes themselves as the Legion of Boom 2.0, then I'm just going to expect a lot of mediocrity from this offense, to be quite honest with you. As much as I love JSN, as much as I like Cooper Kupp, you need to make sure he stays healthy. You need this to turn the corner, the running game. And more importantly, you need to make sure that Sam Darnold continues to blossom and continues to, develop and continues to, well, I shouldn't say continue to develop, but just make sure that he does not look like an outright disaster again. And then everything will be fine. Let's go to the defense here, because that is what truly got the Seahawks back on the map. Obviously, the offense showed up clutch in the fourth quarter, but it was the defensive strength and resilience and their fortitude that allowed the Seahawks to win as many games as they did. They might not have been a top 10 unit, but they still made tremendous strides. 11th in points allowed, 14th in total yards, 10th on third down, 9th in the red zone, 14th in passer rating, 9th in yards per attempt, 11th in passing yards per game, 10th in yards per catch, 8th in sacks, 6th in pressure percentage. The only weakness was their run defense, 23rd in yards per carry, 16th in yards per game. Again, not great, not elite, but compared to what it was in the final 4 to 5 years of Pete Carroll's tenure, I'd say they made a complete 250. Not going to go 360 yet, but 250 is it's a good estimate. The D-line, in my opinion, is what's going to keep this, group intact. That and the secondary. You still have Leonard Williams playing at a high level, 11 sacks last year, 28 quarterback hits, 64 tackles. I mean, he's entering his 9th, 10th season in the league, and he's still playing at a supremely high level. I mean, that's just remarkable. Byron Murphy II, he was definitely one of their high-round picks last year or a couple years ago. Showed that he could be a solid run stuffer, 36 tackles, but only half a sack. So you need that number to improve. Hopefully he can, enter a breakout season. Jaron Reed still putting up decent numbers, 4.5 sacks and 8 starts. Boye Mafe, who I think is my favorite pass rusher on this whole defense, had 6 sacks, which is, a little bit of a dip compared to the year before, but still showed that he could be a quality piece on the edge. Derek Hall really coming off a breakout season. 8 sacks, 20 quarterback hits, and then they just signed DeMarcus Lawrence from the Dallas Cowboys. Only played 4 games last year, but had 3 sacks. So who knows if he could stay on the field? He's coming off a broken foot. My guess is Derek Hall is actually going to take his starting spot in the next, 5-6 weeks into the season. But who knows? Stranger things have happened. So the run defense, like I said, coming off a pretty subpar season, but Ernest Jones is going to be in his first full season with the Seattle Seahawks. And I think that's why the numbers were as bad as they were, because he never really had a chance to, fully ingratiate himself within the system. But yet he still had 94 tackles, a forced fumble, and an interception. But not only do you have Ernest Jones, but you have awesome developmental player in Tyrese Knight coming off 88 tackles and 9 starts with 1.5 sacks. Jones is most likely going to get the green dot, but Tyrese Knight is really coming into his own as a middle linebacker. The secondary is full of feisty playmakers. Devin Witherspoon coming off a solid season, 8 passes defended, a 95 rate allowed. Reek Woolen had a way better season than he did last year, a 78.7 rate with 14 passes defended, and 3 picks. You got Kobe Bryant, you can work him in the nickel, but you can also play him at safety. 82.8 rate, 5 passes defended, 3 interceptions. Julian Love, as a successful compliment. Still an underrated player that should get a lot more Pro Bowl attention. 83.3 rate, 12 passes defended, 3 picks. They drafted Nick Amawari in the second round to, give that room some more depth. And even Josh Jobe showed that, he could be an outstanding player. Only played 10 games, but a 72 rate allowed with 7 passes defended. Those are pretty good numbers if you ask me. So Mike McDonald did a tremendous job, getting this group back on the map. But having said all of this, I don't see them winning any more than 7 games this year. And I know I sound like a hater, and I know that I'm sounding, a little bit too down. But here's the thing. The defense is going to be good. What the hell are we going to get from this offense? And that's just what it comes down to. So let's move on to the next team here, the Arizona Cardinals, coming off an 8-win season after only winning 4 in 2023. And a big reason why was because, the offense, actually everything, improved. At one point, they were actually leading the division at 6-4, but many seasons prior, they fell apart. They collapsed down the stretch, and they just missed the playoffs. So this is a huge year, not just for Jonathan Gannon, not just for the general manager, but it's also a big year for Kyler Murray, because if he continues to go through this cycle of, starting off strong really early, only to fizzle out down the stretch, then there might be serious conversations as to if he should stick around long term, because, the Cardinals at this point, they're tired of settling for just mediocrity, and they want to show that, this is the time for them to really make that next leap. Coming off a decent season, 21 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, but he had a rate under 100. It's the 5th time this has happened for him in 6 seasons. So the supporting cast around him has been tremendous, but you need better production from this guy. More than just 21 touchdown passes. And more importantly, you need to actually reach that 100 threshold, or else your time in Arizona might come to an end sooner than you would hope for. But the offense around him, the supporting cast, is definitely great. James Conner still proving that he could be a workhorse at running back. 1,094 yards with 8 touchdowns. And if you look at the depth, it actually is really solid. I like DeMercado. He's someone that you could really plug into on third down. Trey Benson, a great downhill back as well. So anytime James Conner is, tired or, needs a few plays off, then you could put these 2 in, and you could still get maybe not the same numbers, but decent numbers enough to where you're still moving down the field and you're, not selling for 3 and outs all the time. But one player that I'm really looking forward to watching is Marvin Harrison Jr. I know a lot of people have seen the offseason pictures of him, of how he's been training, of how he's been working out, how much more physically lean he is compared to his rookie season. And I think he is definitely, my prediction is that he's going to be in the top 5 in receiving yards and receiving touchdowns and catches. I don't know if he's going to win the Triple Crown, but I think he's going to be in that conversation. I mean, last year he had 62 catches, 885 yards, and 8 touchdowns. My guess is he's more than definitely going to get 1,000 yards this season, without question. And another player that I think is going to have a lot of, put up a lot of great numbers is Trey McBride. He's definitely going to have more than 2 touchdowns. That's for damn sure. And he's coming up a season in which he caught 111 balls and over 1,100 receiving yards. How do you only have 2 touchdowns yet post those numbers? So Trey McBride is going to be that security blanket and that reliable one that Kyler Murray can always count upon. And Michael Wilson coming off a decent season, 548 yards with 4 touchdowns. Zay Jones, honestly, not expecting a whole lot from him. The same thing with Greg Dortch. But I think that this offense can be a pretty decent unit. I'm not going to say they'll be a top 10 unit, but I like this cast enough to the point where it could put up, a good amount of points and total a good amount of yards, especially with the offensive line that they had. It's a pretty starless front five, if you ask me. I mean, obviously you got Paris Johnson and Jonah Williams, but if you look at this line, you say, this is the line that you can't really expect too much from. But last year, they allowed just 30 sacks, which was the 5th fewest in the league, and they give up the 6th fewest pressure percentage. I mean, that's honestly remarkable, especially when you have a quarterback under center that is 1 year fully removed from a torn ACL. Now we're entering year 2. Really 2.5. But yeah, offensively, I'm not going to be too worried about them. I just want consistency. If you start out strong, I want you to be strong throughout the entire year. I don't want you to go on this freaking roller coaster once again. They're too good for this. Defensively, I think the biggest focus on that for that offseason was to, boost the defensive line, improve the secondary. They didn't put up too bad numbers. They didn't put up horrible numbers, but at the same time, you could expect a little bit better. Tied for 13th in sacks with 41, but they were just 23rd in pressure percentage. That's why you reunite Josh Sweat with Jonathan Gannon. Coming off 8 sacks in Philadelphia, had 2.5 in the Super Bowl against Patrick Mahomes. But one player that unfortunately we're not going to be able to watch this preseason is their first-round pick, Walter Nolan. Suffered a calf injury. It's going to keep him out pretty much all of training camp. Who knows if he's going to be available for week 1. And as much as I like Calais Campbell, this is more than likely going to be his final season. Still putting up decent numbers, but I doubt that he's going to return to what he was in his prime and just put up godly numbers that nobody could see coming. The same can be said for Dalvin Tomlinson, LJ Collier, Browning. I mean, he's second on the depth chart behind Zaven Collins. Obviously, they just acquired him in a trade last year from the Denver Broncos. Only had 2 sacks, entering his first full season with the Cardinals. So who knows? Maybe he just needs, more time to learn the system and to, get better situated. But one player that I think really needs to have a better season is Darius Robinson. Last year's first-round pick, only played, 6 games, only had 1 sack. So definitely expected a bigger leap from him. And Dante Stills, if he's the guy that is second in sacks with 4.5, and Zaven Collins is your league leader with 5, then it just goes to show that this is a group that you need to expect better production from. As for the run defense, that was also a little bit of an issue. 23rd in rush yards per carry, 20th in yards per game. Even with a solid and reliable season from Mack Wilson, who thrived with 75 tackles and 3 sacks, you lost Kaiser White, 137 tackles. You brought in Akeem Davis-Gaither, who was a good rotational piece for the Cincinnati Bengals and is, given the opportunity to start. But, 82 tackles. You just need to hope that run defense can definitely improve. I think the added size on the defensive line is going to be a huge help, but it all just comes down to health, and it just comes down to consistency. The same thing with the offense. Secondary, that has always been a concern for me. They only gave up the 5th fewest touchdown passes, which is great, but 21st in rate. They only came up with 9 picks, and they allowed the 4th highest completion percentage at 68.6%. That is not good if you're the Cardinals secondary. That's why in the second round, you move up to draft Will Johnson, who, by the way, should have been drafted in the first round because I personally thought he was the best cornerback coming out of the draft. You get that position addressed. Pair him with Max Melton, who is coming off a pretty solid season, if you ask me. Unfortunately, they lost Starling Thomas to a torn ACL, but he wasn't really coming off a great season anyway. And also, Sean Murphy-Bunting, he's definitely going to miss an extended period of time. He showed that he could still be a reliable nickel corner. 3 interceptions last year, 2 forced fumbles, 77.6 rating, and 15 starts. So really, you're giving a lot of your younger, homegrown, developed players more opportunities to show what they can do in their starting roles. And if you're Buda Baker or Jalen Thompson, you need to actually have a way better season than you did the year before. Tackle-wise, not an issue. Buda Baker, 164. That was second in the league. Jalen Thompson, 98 tackles. When you look at their passing statistics, Buda Baker, 129.3 rating allowed, 5 touchdowns allowed, and Jalen Thompson gave up 122.9 rating allowed. So, yeah, this secondary definitely needs to, improve. It definitely needs to show that, they're not going to just be a doormat to the rest of the league. And if you're Jonathan Gannon, you obviously boosted the defensive line. You improved that side, but you need to make sure that your secondary has enough holds these wide receivers down long enough so that the pressure can get there and that sack number does improve in a big way. I'm expecting another okay season. I'm not expecting a lot of great and impressive victories, but I'm not expecting let me slow down for a second. I'm not expecting a lot of, godly performances. They're going to have at least a couple big upsets, but when November hits and when December hits, those are the months where you're going to keep an eye on them the most. If you're 6-3, you need to make sure that you finish 10-6 or 10-7, 11-6. You cannot finish 8-9 or 9-8. But unfortunately, that's where I honestly see this team going. So, obviously, I'm just hoping that this Cardinals offense takes a big leap. You need to make sure that they stay consistent and that they stay poised. And defensively, if you could show that if you can improve the sack number, then I think it's going to take a lot more. I think it's going to take a lot of pressure off of this secondary. So we'll see what happens there. And last but not least, we'll move on to the San Francisco 49ers. From first to worst in this division. Oh, boy. So injuries had a big part in that one. But if you ask me, I just felt that they were just emotionally drained and exhausted from losing to the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl for the second time in 4 seasons. And just like the 2021 offseason, John Lynch spent a whole lot of time retooling that roster. And now this team is just trying to prove that last year was just an accident. Business. One thing that they had to take care of, the most important thing that they had to take care of was signing Brock Purdy to a contract extension, a deserving contract extension, by the way. 5 years, $265 million with $182 million guaranteed. A little bit of an overpay, but he has definitely proven to be the face of the franchise. And this is a huge year for him because a lot of the pieces that he had in the 2 NFC Championship appearances in the Super Bowl, they're gone. And defense is not as dominant as it was. So Brock Purdy is going to have a lot of more weight on his shoulders to pick up the load on the offense, especially if Christian McCaffrey cannot stay healthy. Only played 4 games last season, and he's played fewer than 8 games 4 of the last 7 seasons. When he's on the field, he's one of the top 3 running backs in the league. But when he is not, it is his absence leaves a huge impact on this offense. They lost Jordan Mason to free agency. You're expecting Isaac Orendo to be that second back and to, serve as that complement. And in the passing game, that is what I really want to see. That is the biggest point of emphasis that I want to pay attention to because they traded away Deebo Samuel. You're not going to get Brandon Ayuk back until week 6. So you're expecting Juwan Jennings to really pick up where he left off last year. He's actually my favorite receiver on the 49ers, coming off a breakout year in which he had 77 catches, 975 yards, and 6 touchdowns. But the guy that really needs to establish himself as wide receiver number 1 is their first-round pick, Ricky Pearsall. Obviously, missed a lot of time last year, coming into this season fully healthy. In the games that he played, 31 catches, 400 yards, 3 touchdowns, 11 games played. So you're expecting him to, fully ingratiate himself within that offense and make an impact. And if you put these two together, if you can get what he gave you in college and Jawan Jennings picks up where he left off, then I think this will definitely be an underrated wide receiver duo. And another player that I think doesn't get a lot of love or attention is DeMarcus Robinson. Coming over from the Los Angeles Rams, had 7 touchdowns and just over 500 yards. But Patrick Mahomes and Matthew Stafford are 2 quarterbacks that got the best out of him. I think Brock Purdy and this Kyle Shanahan West Coast style offense, I think he can do the same. And one other player that I don't think needs any introduction, George Kittle. Anytime you think, oh, well, George Kittle, hasn't really been as dominant as he was in 2018 or 2019, they have not been watching him clearly enough. Last year, he totaled 78 catches, totaled 1,100 yards, and 8 touchdowns. He still proved that he's one of the top 2 tight ends in this game. He is an outright physical freak. He is a monster. He can do so much. He's an outstanding run blocker. He gets open on routes. He can, pick up tremendous yards after the catch. And his size is just one that, so many defenders hate going up against every single year. So my big question mark is Farrell. I don't know why they gave him a 3-year deal. Obviously, it's not worth too much money, but at the same time, I don't really know if he's the guy that you really need to have on the field too much. Maybe they just want him as a run blocking tight end, and that's what they're counting him on for. So who knows there? But I think one win that they had this offseason was, with the amount of players that they lost, they were able to bring back Kyle Juszczyk. They actually cut him earlier this offseason, but they ended up bringing him back because he was willing to take a pay cut. So big win for the 49ers there. As for the offensive line, it's a pretty sturdy unit. 11th in sacks last year, 23rd in pressure percentage. So a little bit of a dip, but Trev Williams missed a lot of time last year. So I'm sure the 49ers are so happy to have him back because he is still one of the best blindside blockers in the league. Dominic Purdy had an outstanding season at right guard. I'm really looking forward to watching him play. McKivitz didn't have a bad year at right tackle. Jake Brendel coming off, a solid season at center. The left guard is what's really interesting because they lost Aaron Banks in free agency. So they're counting on Ben Bartch to be the starter. So I don't expect it to be a huge liability here. Brock Purdy is someone that, always takes care of the football and gets it out very quickly. So I'm not going to be too worried there. And this is Kyle Shanahan. If you're an offensive lineman under his system, I think you'll be in a pretty good situation. Defensively, absolutely fell off the grid. And honestly, that's what happens when your coordinator is Nick Sorensen and the assistant head coach is Brandon Staley. Both of them are gone, and Robert Saleh is officially back. So I am so excited to watch this defense hopefully return to full form and full strength. And I'm sure Nick Bosa is absolutely looking forward to it. Still coming off a pretty promising season, 9 sacks, 24 quarterback hits. But the team itself, only 37 total sacks, which was 23rd in the league, 18th in pressure percentage, and they blitzed the 3rd fewest times in the National Football League. They lost Javon Hargrave, they lost Leonard Floyd, they lost Malik Collins, but they also drafted Mykel Williams in the 1st round. They drafted Alfred Collins in the 2nd. You're trying to beef up that defensive line. You're trying to make sure that Nick Bosa is not the only one generating pressure. And also, another important addition that I don't think gets talked about enough is they brought back Bryce Huff. And, if Yetur Gross-Matos is not healthy by week 1, then Bryce Huff has proven to be a very strong scheme fit in Robert Saleh's defense. Had some of his best seasons with the New York Jets. Didn't have as much production or the production that he wanted last year with the Philadelphia Eagles, but he ended up getting a ring. So at least you could say that. The run defense did okay, 12th in yards per carry, 18th in yards per game, but you still got all-pro Fred Warner with the green dot in his helmet. Still the best middle linebacker in football. 134 tackles, or 131, I should say. 2 interceptions, 4 forced fumbles. Try saying that 5 times fast. But a big loss was, Drake Greenlaw departing in free agency. Didn't play a lot last year because he was trying to recover and rehab from the torn Achilles. D. Winters, more likely expected to fill that void. We'll see what he can do there. Luke Gifford, I'm just guessing that he's there for a depth option. I'm not really sold on him. I don't know what he could really do. The secondary, on the other hand, in my opinion, is the weakest link. They didn't do too bad against the pass, but let me read these numbers here. 27th in points per game, just 17 takeaways, 25th on third down, the second worst red zone group. So it's a team that if they're in bad field position or if they're on the field for too long, then this is a group that can definitely get worn out and exhausted and picked apart. You got two promising corners in Diamador Lamar coming off a strong season. Obviously, they gave him a long-term extension to be their number one corner, 70.3 rate allowed, 2 interceptions. But this is the first year that he's really going to establish himself as the number one corner on the team. Travarius Ward departed in free agency, missed a lot of time last year, but you put him along with Renardo Green as the two starting corners. We'll see what could happen. Those two put up pretty solid numbers, but my biggest question is, what are you going to expect from the rest of you guys, the rest of the guys on that group? Trey Brown, 130 plus rating allowed. There's a reason why he's second on the depth chart as the nickelback. Upton Stout, haven't really seen a whole lot from him, so I can't really say that he's going to have an outstanding 2025 season. Jair Brown, 108 rating allowed. Somebody that, can make plays, can put up a decent amount of tackles and pick off a pass or two, but, haven't really seen a whole lot from him. And the Malik Mustafa, he's actually my favorite player on that secondary. 12 starts last year, a 54.3 passer rating allowed, and 72 tackles at safety. Obviously, you see the O there, so he's obviously, trying to recover from an injury. And if he can't go by week 1, then these two are more likely going to take the starting spot. And in my opinion, they're not really upgrades. So you can just only hope that, this starting secondary can heal up and, get healthy as quickly as possible. So that wraps it up for the NFC West. Actually, I haven't even given my full analysis on the 49ers. If everybody could stay fully healthy, then I could absolutely see this team winning the division and make the playoffs. The Rams are going to be their biggest competition just because they won it last year. They have the offense that can really match up well against this 49ers defense. And more importantly, that defense has definitely shown that it can shut down Brock Purdy in the toughest moments. What I really want from them, though, is to hoist the Lombardi Trophy. We've already seen them in the playoffs. We've already seen them win the division. We've seen them in conference championship games. We saw them take the Chiefs to the brink in 2 Super Bowls, but they couldn't hold on. And for Brock Purdy, for Kyle Shanahan, for John Lynch, this is an absolutely critical year. This is not one where they can just, get to the playoffs and say, oh, well, we came up short. Better luck next year. No. There's a reason why you gave Brock Purdy that much money. You let all those players that you counted upon for the last 5 or so years walk away in free agency. There's a reason why you retool this roster, because you need to show that this is the year where you could truly turn things around. And I don't think the national media talks about that enough. They're still focused on, Micah's holdout, Terry McLaurin's holdout, Trey Hendrickson, who's the best receiver in football. And to some degree, rightfully so. I get it. But at the same time, this is a year for them to really show that, they are capable of winning a championship. They have too much talent on both sides of the ball. They have an outstanding coaching staff. Their front office is exceptional. Yet they just can't find a way to get over the hump. So, final order, I think the 49ers are going to win the division at 12-5. I think the Rams will go 11-6. They'll back into the playoffs as a wild card team. The Arizona Cardinals, I think they just missed the playoffs at 8-9. Just because, we haven't really seen enough from them to show that they are a team made for the playoffs. We've seen tremendous flashes that they can improve year after year after year, but Kyler Murray starts off strong, then falls off fast. The defense, in the same boat. So you just need to make sure that they just stay on a straight path and they don't go through too many ups and downs. I think they'll go 8-9. As for the Seattle Seahawks, like I said, they're probably going 7-10. I like the defense. I like that they made a lot of improvements from last year, or they, really, took made a complete turnaround and showed that they are a team that can really help this team win as many games as possible. They won 10 for crying out loud, but the offense, that is the biggest X factor, especially Sam Darnold. Coming off an outstanding year last season, but was it just an aberration? And if you look at the supporting cast around him, the O-line, the receivers, the running back core, it's not as strong as it was in Minnesota. So I think they'll be in last place at 7-10. Not a horrible season, but inverse from what it was the year before. All right. That just about wraps it up. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe for additional content. Oh, one more thing before we go. Do one more thing here. Let's see what division we're going to preview next week. Going to spin this wheel here and see what we got. Or actually, not next week, tomorrow. Of course, the AFC East. All right, so tomorrow we will be previewing the Buffalo Bills, the Miami Dolphins, the New England Patriots, and the New York/New Jersey Jets. That's actually going to be a really fun division. I'm actually looking forward to that. So long, au revoir, goodbye. We will see you tomorrow afternoon. So long, everyone.